Howdy of you delicious people. I'm here today to review The Protege. So, going into this movie, I would say how to break this down. Well, there's something really good about each one of these characters that are on screen right now. Like, Michael Keaton is like a really interesting uh, character being presented to us in this film. He's beating the crap out of people in this movie, so that's pretty awesome. Samuel L. Jackson's character is to be tied to the main character, who is Anna. The only thing that seems goofy about this movie is names of characters and so on and so forth. But um, but here's also like a thing that I would say about this movie. There is a crap ton of just transitions. Like, that's the only thing that probably like ruined me for this movie, where it's just kind of like, God, this movie is such a choppy piece of work. Like, there are some interesting action scenes in here. There is just really some cool things that they do here, but I could also feel like this has technically at some point been done before, probably, because it just feels like a overly generic action movie, but has some really cool star power to it that could make this movie intriguing. Uh, but yeah, but this movie is just too choppy for me to just like. I'm just like, man, I don't know how I'm gonna get into spoilers about this one because there's too much going on. It's a bunch of jumble mess of a whole bunch of scenes kind of smashed all together. That is to just be like, man, I wish this movie would have slowed down at some freaking point. Just because it's like go 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 go, just chop 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 chop. It's like, good God, give me some like give me a 30-minute scene where it's just one spot and I'm good, or more than that. Give me like a 40 to 50 minute piece out of this hour and 40 some odd minute movie that just kind of is like slowed the f down. Cause it's go 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 with this movie. Anyways, uh, but yeah, there was certain parts about this movie that I enjoyed. Like, there is a part towards the end that helps you understand the beginning, which is kind of a cool thing. And I think I'll go into probably explaining that beginning at the beginning of this review, because I don't think it really matters. Like, if you get to the spoiler version and you know what I'm talking about and whatever. But yeah, so uh, like, I would say that this is a decent movie. Uh, like, I would just say that this is a okay film if I'm gonna go by my usual grading. Like, it's okay, but for me, it's freaking too choppy. It's too generic, and like a lot of people are just kind of there in the film, and it's just like I have a hard time investing in things just because I'm like, I don't think anything really matters here. It's just like, let's just keep going with whatever this thing is to tide or lead up to. There is nothing that really feels original that is to be placed in this movie. It just feels like an action film that is to honestly be like, it has some like cool action spots, but I can't help there being too much familiar territory here. uh like, there is to be one spot where the main character Anna is to take uh a hose reel from a part of the building and then just kind of like slide, basically like sling down this one part of this building to just try to like get through this building a lot quicker. I'm like, okay, I feel like I've seen that somewhere. uh I don't know, there's so much about this movie where I felt like this is kind of familiar, but it's interesting to like see Michael Keaton doing action sequences, just because it's like, what's gonna happen when we get to like the Flash movie where he's gonna be Batman again, or we'll see like uh Michael Keaton maybe in other things in the near future, because who exactly knows with what he's going to be involved in the future. So with that said, I think I've kind of, in a way, like gone into spoilers about this. Like, what would be like? I'm not quite sure what would even be the teeing up of this movie. So I guess the teeing up thing could be that Samuel Jackson is almost like Anna's dad in this movie, and Samuel Jackson, who is Moody in this film, is to seemingly be ill, seemingly be sick, and there is a kind of like a moment of which that we get a swerve with this character, and eventually that will uh, eventually happen in this film. I don't want to spoil too much here in the cryptic sense. Uh, really, just Michael Keaton just appears as a guy who is to not really wanting to be the bad guy, but coincidentally, uh, Anna, who Anna is going after, is to coincidentally be tied with Michael Keaton's character, who's Rembrandt, who is to be getting orders from somebody, and basically that leads to having Rembrandt trying to protect this guy named Hayes, and eventually, like, there's a whole like escalation of finding certain people that are involved in these cases. We also have uh, uh, Robert Patrick, who a lot of people know from Terminator 2, the liquid metal Terminator. He plays Billy Boy in this movie, and I'm like, why do they even need this character? Like, it just feels like there's a lot of stuff that it didn't feel like they exactly needed in this movie, but I guess they wanted to try to create these interesting characters. So, like, anybody can go through this movie and be like, oh, like this could be like me, or this could be like my kind of like, ooh, I like Michael Keaton, or oh, I like Robert Patrick in this movie, or oh, I like Samuel Jackson, or oh, I like Anna because she's like really, really cool, and maybe some females will probably like, ooh, I like Anna because, anyways, so. With that said, yeah, like just teeing it up a little bit here, but the crappiest freaking shop of a movie, I tell you. So both Anna and Moody are to specialize in finding people who should not be able to be found. And most of the time, when they are to get to those people, there is probably a reason because they are to either kill that certain person or kill the person that is tied to said person. So, and there's eventually this, again, an escalation of trying to get to, I think, one person by getting to several other. So yeah. Anyways, uh, let's get into this film. Let's go out of our way to say that it's about that time to go into this thing called spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we can do spoil this movie. There's a lot going on in this film, and so because so uh, if there is a spot that I miss, or there's like a lot of stuff that feels rushed in this review, there's probably a reason for that. This might not be in heavily detail, and it covers every second to second transition of a thing. Just because I'm like, yeah, this movie is just all over the goddamn place, and it's just like, hey, we have random person coming in for some freaking reason that has some minute bit of information. Great, who cares? Transition, transition again. Oh my god. Anyways, so let's go into this one. So spoilers now. Uh, oh, where can you see this movie? You could go out of your way to see this film on an app that I've been using called Yes Movies and Shows. Go into probably just Google Play and probably search Yes or Yes Movies. You should probably be able to find this fairly quickly, hopefully. And also, there's an app that I've been using fairly reliably called Fox HD Movies. You can probably search Fox HD Movies, and you should be able to find that fairly quickly. The logo will say Fox HD Movies. You'll find it fairly quickly, I hope. So, for you to be able to watch Protege for absolutely free. Anyways, going into this, let's get into spoilers now, full on. So, full on spoilers. So, beginning of the movie is to have Anna go on to have a man get kidnapped, a man who is to be involved with a guy named uh, Don Preda, who, when Anna is to eventually get the ransom for this said kidnapping, Anna is to actually not have any interest whatsoever in the kidnapping of this guy. Anna's men only kidnapped this guy to get to Don Prida. So she ends up taking her phone, and it actually is a knife, and she ends up stabbing him in the neck. He ends up falling into his pool, who he was swimming in. And so she was supposed to take this $3 million, which she wanted absolutely no interest in. She ends up walking away. So, Samuel Jackson's character, who is Moody, was to ask her, it's like, well, hey, did you take any of that $3 million? And Anna's like, no. And so Samuel Jackson is to call the people to transition the money, and we start to see that he is to end up coughing, and so it seems that Anna is to ask, hey, you should probably get that checked and looked at. Because she technically is her Anna is technically Moody's daughter, because we have in the very beginning of this movie, Samuel Jackson was to go through this one place where all of a sudden there had been a number of people that had been killed off, and so Moody is to continue to go into this place to open this little, I think, armoire or like closet of sorts, to find Anna there, and she's holding a gun. The gun seems to uh, not be able to go off, and so Moody ends up fixing the gun for her and giving it back to her, and then convinces her to go with him to eventually go off into being like having Moody pay these armored soldiers uh, to take Anna out of Vietnam. Like, the very beginning of this movie is to take place in Vietnam, and then we eventually transition into a place called Lundra or Londrin, something along those lines. So, anyways, a lot of transitions in this movie. Freaking like, but we also found out that Anna, all those guys are dead because of her, because she killed all of them. Because evidently there was a war to be broken out at that location, or there was just some people who took it upon themselves to like kill a lot of people there with their guns and whichever. And so while this girl was to be held prisoner, all of a sudden we have a guy who is putting this gun together fairly quickly, and then uh, walking over to go and get a bed sheet. Anna evidently had figured out how to quickly put a gun together, and ended up not only shooting the guy who was getting the bed sheet, but then she ends up shooting everyone else that was a part of this guy's mercenary act of sorts. So that answers the problem of, like, okay, what happened? Like, in the very beginning of this movie because they talk about this towards the very end. Anna ends up cutting her hair really short, and eventually she'll cut her hair short again somewhere in this film. So now that that's all covered, so Anna, I guess, is supposedly a book shop owner, because technically Moody is a bookshop owner, so, and he is to basically give Anna the store when he is to die. Uh, so, uh, I'm trying to figure out the perfect all transition here, because I feel like I've missed a scene or two. Uh, so Anna is to eventually go to Moody's home and celebrate his birthday. Evidently, he is to be about, I guess, roughly 70 years old, supposedly. Sure. Anna is to give Moody this guitar, this V guitar that supposedly there's a rare number of them that exist. Uh, Moody is to not really play much of the guitar because he can't really give it justice because he can't play as well as probably any number of people who has probably had this guitar. So, like, but it's a great gift because of how rare it is. It just seems like these people really love rare things, and that's all that really matters. It doesn't matter that it is a thing that they like aren't familiar with, or that like they probably just know the history of it. They probably don't know the actual thing itself. Like at one point, we have Michael Keaton who walks into Anna's bookstore and is to ask for a specific book to just kind of see like how smart this woman is. And so and it's to mention, like, well, that is impossible for you to get that kind of book because there was only very few rare printings of this book. But uh, Anna goes and gives Rembrandt, who's Michael Keaton's character, this book of Edgar Allan Poe, and mentions it's like, well, this is a very rare book. There's only been a certain number of them around, and so that leads Rembrandt to just go, okay, well, hey, maybe I should give you my number and like maybe we'll go out sometime. And Anna's like, well, I don't know about that. Like if anything, like I'll probably play hard to get and so on and so forth. So all of a sudden Rembrandt is to leave the store and he is to actually say something from that book, like as if he memorized it or whatever, to walk off and have one of Anna's workers be like, hey, like, did he just quote something from that book? And Anna's like, yeah. Like, so in other words, he probably knows his stuff too. So, eventually, what is to happen in this movie is that supposedly Moody's character is to head to Vietnam to eventually go after a character named Voyle. So of course, Moody is to ask Anna, like, well, do you want to go to Vietnam with me? Anna's like, no, I never want to go back there because of Vietnam is where originally she had to kill a number of people to eventually be rescued technically by Moody's character. So Moody is to say, it's like, well, hey, like, technically you need to go back there. You need to eventually just like you don't know where you're going until you know where you've been, kind of thing. Is kind of how it's kind of phrased by my head about like why Moody is wanting to press Anna to go back to where she was in Vietnam. So what happens eventually is Anna is to find out that Moody is to have actually been killed. So Moody is to eventually have tried to, or Moody had been attacked by several men, which is to supposedly have led him to die in this tub. Anna is to go and check over him, and eventually Anna is to find the drone that Moody was to have while they were giving him his birthday uh, cupcakes. So, with this drone, there was a flash drive that Moody had on it. So Anna goes, looks through this flash drive to find a guy named Voyle, and so she's like, okay, like I guess I need some more information on this. So Anna is to eventually go and meet this biker gang who is to be tied to a character named uh, uh, Billy Boy. So Anna is to be asking Billy Boy this information about this guy, which leads to Billy Boy mentioning, like, dude, you're not going to easily be able to get to Voyle. And Anna eventually goes into easily just kind of going into Voile's car, talking to him. But then eventually that leads her to eventually leading to meeting these other men in this building who all of a sudden shoot Voyle and then start trying to get after Anna. They start shooting through the walls because she ends up going and getting into one of the ceiling tiles. She is to start like scampering through the walls and eventually goes and turns on the sprinkler system, and eventually she ends up falling through one of the uh, ceiling panels and like starts taking out most of these guys. But eventually, at the end of this, she ends up getting taken by these men, tortured, waterboarded, and kind of taken for all kinds of information, but she gives them none, which leads eventually Rembrandt to eventually appear and coincidentally be tied to these men. But Rembrandt is coming in and giving Anna some like some uh, soup of some kind, or some kind of like liquid thing of some kind to help her heal. And so Rembrandt is just kind of talking to her, and so eventually what ends up happening is Rembrandt is to tell, I think his name is Duquette? I don't know. I'm probably mispronouncing that name. Or mispronouncing that character. I don't quite know if that's the exact character. So eventually the people come into Anna's cell, and Anna of course like takes them out with all kinds of like trays and stuff like that, and breaks some guy's like face into a sink, and then leaves before Rembrandt is to even like talk to her again and try to get information out of her. Like Rembrandt was also trying to tell all these guys to not torture her until Rembrandt is to come back, because he wants her to be like coherent and like to be able to get information out of her. So, but Anna runs out, and so that eventually is to lead to Anna going on this scavenger hunt to find this guy who is to have been deaf and blind, and had been like seeking free treatment because like, but they were surprised that this guy had lived for so long. So all of a sudden Rembrandt is to call Anna and know exactly where she is. And so Rembrandt is like, well, hey, how is that working out for you? And Anna's like, yeah, like I guess I went all the way out here to just figure out that like I was looking for the wrong guy. So eventually what ends up happening is that Rembrandt and Anna are to go and have a date, but Anna is to say where it is and when it is. So they have a date with one another, which leads to them both under the table holding guns to one another. And so eventually they just decide, like, you know what, like we're gonna talk here, but then we're really not going to kill one another. They end up going their separate ways, and so the guy who is working with Hayes, who is working, uh, who had the Hayes is the main guy, and then we have Rembrandt, and then we have the guy who's working with Rembrandt. So the guy who's working with Rembrandt is to uh, think that Rembrandt isn't going to kill Anna. So they start to turn on Rembrandt and start to try and kill him. And man, like this part is cool where uh, we start to just see like Michael Keaton just beat the crap out of these guys, which is to eventually really lead up to Rembrandt trying to fight Anna because Anna is to have this shotgun. And but eventually what happens is they fight like such in a cool way where like Rembrandt goes through this table, this glass table, and eventually Rembrandt is to tell Anna like, you know what, it's either you're gonna F me or you're going to kill me. Which one is which? So both of them sleep with one another, both of them go into a bed that is to coincidentally be of a man uh, that was killed. I think he was to be either drowned or he was to be like noosed and choked to death. Because that's the last thing that you see him. I think Anna ended up taking him and drowning him, and then noosing him to, I guess, make it look like that he had ended his own life. So so after them sleeping with one another, let me pause here for a quick second. All right. So really they're talking about like how long they've kind of been doing this, and really they're kind of vague about it. They're really just like, "Hey man, I can go and like put two bullets in the back of your head and just go and eat a sandwich." Like how like a lot of them don't really have much of a second thought about killing one another or whichever, but eventually they go their separate ways. And but there's still this like tension between these two characters. It's really interesting. So eventually we have Anna, who is to make her way out of that situation, to eventually almost get shot up by some men. And all of a sudden, we end up finding out that Moody is to come out of the shadows and help Anna and bandage her up, basically, like put glue onto her chest. And so we end up finding out that Moody isn't dead after all. And so it's like, it's basically Captain America Winter Soldier all over again. Moody is to basically tell us that he ended up putting so many shotgun rounds into a guy that looks like his head, so you couldn't tell the difference, dental records or otherwise. And so Moody just put a bunch of stuff that was to resemble him onto this man so no one would tell the difference. So that way he could kind of be like the man in the shadows eventually to poke his head out and just say, no, I'm still alive. So transition us on to eventually now uh, Anna has to go after Hayes. So Hayes is to put together, I guess, this banquet or this big, lavish thing where he is to be on this podium. And so Anna is to appear as this waitress that is kind of commingling here. She's to have much shorter hair. And so it seems that Rembrandt is to be like the Secret Service guy that is to try to protect Hayes. So all of a sudden, Rembrandt is just kind of looking around, trying to see if he can spot Anna. And all of a sudden, Anna is to pop out a gun, and that leads Rembrandt to go running and trying to knock over Anna. While doing that, I think Rembrandt is to fire off a round for whatever reason, and so that leads Hayes to run off to think that he is going to be in uh, in safety, but instead, Moody is to appear in front of Hayes, mentioning how uh, that there are people in this world that are really and truly evil, that they don't really know the difference about certain things, and so whole lines of dialogue between Hayes and Moody. Uh, like there was this one interesting dialogue that Moody was to have in this movie, talking about when he is to die, that maybe there is going to be a lot of people in the afterlife wanting to settle some old scores or pick some old bones or something like that. That was a whole kind of interesting dialogue that happened there in the early part of this movie. But there were some also interesting parts here about Moody's character kind of like uh, talking to Hayes and asking about a car bomb that had gone off, and Hayes had mentioned that a person that was actually in the car had no real significance to him, and Moody's like, yeah, like of course, like there's a lot of people that probably have no significance to you. So because he's a guy with money, he can just buy anything basically, even if that means to find some replacement somewhere or something. So eventually, what is to really be said here is that Moody is to think that he is to probably not get far from where, uh, like far from after killing Hayes. So what Moody is to end up doing is to have this big thing of explosives with him to basically not only take out Moody, but to also just take out Hayes. So technically, after all, Moody is going to technically die. So Anna is to make her way out of this establishment that they're in to eventually be met by Rembrandt, who eventually they are to talk things out, but eventually the explosion kind of all of a sudden kind of like tosses them out to eventually have Anna eventually get away from Rembrandt, because Rembrandt was to mention how like, you know what, like that was a kind of dumb decision that you had done with Hayes because you're never gonna get to him. And Anna was like, well, it was all part of the plan all along to do like uh, to do what had basically happened. And so all of a sudden, that's when the big explosion goes off, and then it's like, hell yeah, like freaking, you got the guy anyways. So eventually, what still happens towards the very end of this is Anna is to go back into the spot of which that she was before, like her whole origin story, and go back to where she was, and all of a sudden Rembrandt is to appear there, and Anna is saying like, well, hey, like why weren't you here sooner? And Rembrandt is like, oh, I stopped for a bite. Like it's just like, yeah, frickin' just like, nah, whatever. Like, I don't care. So Anna and Rembrandt are to basically have this decision of like one or the other of them have to die. And so now there has to be that decision of who is going to live. Rembrandt is to just consistently make this consensus of like, hey, we can still be alive. Like maybe there's a whole there maybe there's some wiggle room around this. And Anna's like, well, I don't know about that. So eventually, both of them are to hold their guns out uh, for us to eventually hear a shot being fired. And then supposedly Anna is to be seen walking out of the building. So are we to assume that Anna had lived? Are we to assume that Rembrandt had died? Are we also to assume that no one fired anything and both these characters are still alive because there could be a Protege 2 coming up somewhere down the line? So that's based. Jeez, this hurt sound. Anyways, I get scared by sounds easily. So, with that said, I think that's all that I wanted to say about this movie. As I got scared on my way out of here. Yeah, so a lot of just chop it, chop it, chop. But with that said, I think I covered a bulk of this film, or some of it at least. So with that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody. An hour and 40 some odd minute film, and I got it done in like 36 minutes. It feels weird. Feels like I didn't do. I think I skipped a lot of the talking parts, and there's probably like a rush to like get some of. But I didn't think that that would be done that quickly to review this. But more likely, it's like because you missed XYZ 85 parts of this movie, which is perfectly fine because I don't have that kind of time. I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.